Hey, how's it going? Mr. Bill here, and in this tutorial I'll be talking about this plugin. So this is a plugin made by a company called Zynaptiq, and it's called Unfilter. And essentially what it does is it inverts transfer functions using blind deconvolution. So what I mean by that is essentially it unfilters things that have been filtered before. So for instance, if you have a really ratty sounding signal that has a lot of low frequencies missing, you can kind of replace those low frequencies with this plugin, providing that it has some low frequency information in it. Even if it's a really low amount of low frequency information, it can still like invert the transfer function that was applied to that signal and kind of bring them back out again. And the same goes for like high frequencies. If they're gone, it can kind of bring those back out again. And it does all of this using blind deconvolution. So essentially the plugin learns a snapshot of the signal, and then it guesses what's been done to the signal or what kind of transfer function has been applied to the signal, and then it inverts that by however much it believes it's been applied. And so yeah, in this tutorial I'll go through all of these sections, how it works, and then show you some applications. So the first section of this plugin I'll go through is the learning section, which is this bottom left hand section here. So by default the learn button here is turned on, and like I said before, it has to learn a snapshot of the signal before it can know what to do with it. So with this learn button turned on, the transfer function updates pretty much continuously. So if we play this, you can see that this red line here, which is the transfer function as denoted here, is updating constantly. And if we turn it off, the transfer function just stays static. You can see that line has stopped moving now, and it's basically saying that that's what the filtering that's been applied to it is. So if we turn that back on, you can see again that it starts bouncing around a little bit and kind of learning more information about this signal as it goes. We then have this reset button. If we click that, we can see that it resets the transfer function completely. We then have this DCY button, which stands for decay. And that's kind of like how long it remembers the transfer function for. So if you wanted to have like a static transfer function, you would have to leave that all the way up. But if you want the transfer function to keep updating consistently throughout the tune, you would kind of turn that down, and it would learn new things about the tune constantly. Like this. You can see it kind of moving around and being a little less static. And then the average control here is how often it takes a snapshot. So at the very highest value, it has to be kind of longer to consider it like a filter feature. And you can see that it takes longer for the line to fill up when we play that. And also because learn's turned on and decay is turned down, you can see that we don't even have to reset the transfer function. It just falls again instantly. And if we have the average right down, you can see it jumping around like crazy. Like this, you can see these pops coming out and stuff, but there's a few problems with doing that. Like it will look at like little transients and stuff as filter features. So I kind of find having the average up yields a bit better of a result. If we turn noise on, it only evaluates the noisy components of the signal. So if we play this, you can see like the transfer function isn't really being as crazy as it was before, because it's only really evaluating like the noisier content of the signal rather than the actual kind of lots of the frequency content. And then the only last things that we have in this section is the save and load buttons. So if we choose to save, we can save our transfer function and then apply it to another signal. So if I turn the decay up so it remembers the transfer function, turn noise off, and then we take, say, that transfer function there, we can then save it. And when you save it, you get the option to change the minimum phase between 10 and 1000. And you can also switch it to zero phase ordering. So you would switch it to zero phase ordering if you were using software that like only used zero phase ordering impulse responses. And then we can also load. So once we save our transfer function, we can load and then apply it to any other signal. So the next section I'll talk about it here is the processing section. So the intensity control here, at positive values removes detected filter responses, and at negative values it exaggerates filter responses, or the transfer function that was discovered. So if we play this and we start exaggerating it, you can hear that a lot of high frequencies become present. So that would be because it has decided that there was obviously like something going on with the high frequencies and they were being removed, and it's used its blind deconvolution to decide that it should add more of that. But you can easily kind of go a little bit too far with this plugin. And if we go down if we use less of the intensity control, and you can see that it's applying more of like a low pass filtering to it, so there's less high frequencies than before, so it's exaggerating that filter effect. The resolution control here removes roll-offs at higher values, so at the moment it's like removing roll-offs, and then at lower values it removes resonances, so that resonance we're getting really high up, if we have the resolution at a lower value, we don't have that anymore. That really high frequency resonance, which is kind of annoying. So we'll bring that down a little bit. And then the smoothing control, it results in less narrow band boosts. So if we just turn that up, once again, we'll have like hopefully less of that resonance. The weighting here, it applies a Fletcher-Munson curve to the transfer function. So it just sounds more natural, I guess, if you have it turned up. I should bring that down a bit as well. And then the 7-band EQ here, it's essentially just a mastering grade graphic EQ, and it's just plus or minus 6 dB, and if we click on it you can see that amount there. So if we press 6, that's the maximum amount, and that's more used for like broadband EQing after you've kind of processed it the way that you want it. So the next section of this plugin I'll talk about is the graphic and EQ section. So basically on its default mode it's an EQ, and it's a pretty good EQ actually, so we can just move this around. You can create an arbitrary amount of nodes, so you can just kind of create an infinite amount, which is really cool. So at this stage it's just an EQ, and obviously that's going to sound pretty stupid. And it goes plus or minus 12 dB. Or we can set this EQ to int bias, which stands for intensity bias. So this is like frequency dependent offsets just for the intensity control. So for instance, if we turn like 63 hertz or 50 hertz or whatever that is up by 1 dB, then that's just turning the intensity control up at that frequency. So we don't have to kind of broadband the whole thing. So I'm just going to make that 0. And then if we look at the colors, the magenta line, if you can see that, it's like really thin. That's the input. The green is the output. The red is the the measured filter response, and that's pretty much it. And they're all, it all says that down here anyway. And then the sample rate is 44.1K, and I think that's most of the stuff that we have to go through for this section. So we can also turn the mode between linear, which is like this triangular sort of slope, or ease-IO, which is rounded, or peak dip, which is kind of more narrow bands, or we can go like also step edge, which is like square. Actually, turning this onto EQ mode will probably make that easier to see. And step mid, which is kind of similar, it's just like larger bands, I guess. If we turn snap on, then snap just snaps the EQ to, let's turn this back to ease-IO, it just snaps the node to 0 once you get close to it like this, which is kind of cool. And yeah, that's pretty much all there is. If we click shift and click on multiple nodes, we can move them around as a chunk, which is kind of nice. And if we just click on a single node, we can use our arrow keys like this to move that around. And that also applies to these controls here. Once you have a control focus by clicking on it, you can then use arrow keys to move them around as well. So the last section of this plugin that I have to talk about is the output section here, and it's pretty simple. It's all like really basic kind of audio stuff that you would have seen before. So the first thing we have is a gain control, and that just goes between 0, plus 12 and minus 12 dB. We then have a limiter here, which is just a brick wall limiter, which just slams things to 0 dBFS if you turn the gain control up, and that's after the gain control, obviously. We then have a high pass filter, which removes low frequencies or puts them back in. And then the link control, this only works if the learn control is turned off. And essentially what that does is it applies the transfer function to both the left and the right channels simultaneously, rather than obviously when it's adapting constantly and learning constantly, the left and the right channels are always different. So that only works with a static transfer function. And then bypass just turns the processing of this plugin off completely, or turns it back on if you turn it back off again. And then the final control, noise mon, which is actually a really interesting control. If you have this noise control over here turned on, as I said before, it's only affecting like the noisy parts of the signal. So noise mon stands for noise monitor. So if we turn this on, you can just hear all the noisy parts of the signal rather than actually hearing the signal itself. So it's kind of cool. You could use that as like a creative effect, just to take like all the transient-y sort of stuff out of tunes or something. It's a pretty interesting control. So anyway, yeah, let's do some creative applications and tests. Alright, so I've got a bunch of files here that I want to do tests on. The first file is just a normal WAV file. The second file is an MP3 of bad quality, and when I say bad quality, I mean like 64K kbps, so like just terrible MP3 quality. Then I have a pre-filtered signal, so with this signal I've just put a filter on it, and we're going to put unfilter after that to try and unfilter it. Then I have some drum stuff, so basically the drums sound like this. And I've got the room mics and the overheads separated. I might have to turn. So I want to see like, you know, how Unfilter affects those as well. And then I have a pre-master, so I'm going to test it out as a mastering tool. So basically we're going to see how Unfilter affects all of these things differently. So we'll start off with the good quality WAV, I guess, because I doubt there'll be much to do to that. And at any given time, I'm just going to run one version of Unfilter because it's kind of CPU intensive actually. So, all right, let's try this. So by turning the intensity up, it's adding high frequencies. So it's obviously decided that that there's not enough high frequencies in there for it. Wow, there's a lot of noisy parts in that signal. If we just turn on the noise monitor, we can hear tons of just crazy noise. Okay, so anyway, that's actually I might just turn that gain down because it's already at 0 anyway. So that's what it sounds like with Unfilter, and then I'll just hit the bypass button so you can hear the difference. So I think it sounds a little bit better with it. It's pretty subtle, but it just adds a little bit more high frequencies and stuff. This is just a mastered, like a mastered tune of mine, and I think it sounds, you know, kind of just a little bit cleaner or something with it on. So a really cool plugin. It's really nice for making things sound just really crispy. So this is the bad quality MP3 of the same tune. So it sounds like this with no processing. So there's like no high frequencies at all in comparison. So you can hear it's just terrible. So I'll turn Unfilter on and we'll start turning the intensity up again. Okay, so that's what it sounds like with the processing and without. So I'll just turn it on and off, and if you want to watch my mouse down here, you can see when it's on and off. So that's off, and this is on. So it undoubtedly made it sound better, even though like it's not really supposed to be applied to unfiltered, shitty MP3s, I guess. But that's the thing, you can apply it to anything, and it essentially makes any signal that, you know, needs cleaning up. It kind of cleans anything up. So it's like a really useful plugin just for, you know, making signals sound better that are a little bit ratty and stuff. So this is the pre-filter signal. So it's had I just applied an EQ to it. So hopefully it hears exactly what this transfer function is and does the exact opposite thing. Okay, so this is without the processing. The processing. So you can hear how it's pretty much almost completely reversed that transfer function, or completely inverted it. So if we listen to the original WAV with no processing, and then the unfiltered version, it's even added like more highs back than there were originally, so I could bring this EQ down a bit. And remember, if we use shift, we get like more control with these. I think it even sounds like more open with the unfiltered version than the original master. Okay, so far it's made everything sound better, even the mastered version. So I've got two more things to try. One is the room mics on the drums. So the original drums sound like this, and the room mic sounds like this. So let's run this on that. So what I'm doing is I'm turning the intensity down from its neutral value, so it accentuates the filter function. Okay, so this is without the processing, and with the processing. So it's definitely made it sound fatter, and maybe even if we mix that in with the original drums now, it'll sound like super fat. No unfilter. And then unfilter. Definitely makes the room sound a lot bigger. Okay, so now we've got overheads. Okay, so if I again turn this intensity down. And maybe turn this EQ up. Okay, so that's just the overheads, right? So if we listen to the whole drums with no overheads, and with no unfilter, and with unfilter. So it obviously doesn't sound as good as the original signal, but it sounds a lot better. And then again, if we throw this in with the original signal, it sounds like this. And if we get rid of it. So it's definitely like making those things sound better. It's not making them sound exactly the same as they were, but it's definitely like cleaning it up and doing its best to invert the transfer function, which is really cool. So the last thing I wanted to try it as was a mastering tool. So I'm just going to leave the learn function on and try and compare this this pre-master to this master. So the master sounds like this. And we're going to try and make the pre-master sound something similar. So I guess the first thing we should do is just set that to neutral. Need to also level match, so I'll turn this down. Yeah, I'll just leave the intensity at neutral and just use the EQ probably. So let's turn the highs up a bit. So that's the Unfilter master, as opposed to the original master. So it's not quite as good as the original master in my opinion, but it's like, it's not bad either, you know, like if you just were to do a quick master or something, like considering this track here was professionally mastered against like something that's just chucking Unfilter on it, and kind of sounds pretty good. Yeah, so they're both pretty good. So anyway, that's the Unfilter plugin. Hopefully you enjoy it. I mean, it's definitely worth downloading the demo from their website, which I'll put a link in the video description for. And yeah, if you're keen to have a look at this plugin and try it out for yourself and do all these tests for yourself, I've found it to be like a really useful tool, and I'm using it in quite a lot of my production now. So yeah, if you're into sampling and stuff like that, it's definitely useful to have. So yeah, anyway, hope you enjoyed this video. Go check out the Zynaptiq stuff, and also check out MrBillsTunes.com. Cheers.
For more information, video tutorials, free music and more, please visit www.mrbillstunes.com.